So first, we're going to look at research, how you find out how many votes you need, what the rules of the elections are, what your community has done in the past. So the first thing we're going to do is look, and the examples that I'm going to give are city council and school board. That tends to be the entry level campaign office that people choose. If you're doing other offices, absolutely look at that. People run for governor without ever getting elected to anything. People run for president without ever getting elected to things. But the vast majority of new municipal offices are city council and school board. So that's where we're going to put our first examples. At large offices are very different from districts. So we're going to start basically, does your city use at large elections or do they use district based elections? And it used to be that almost everyone in Orange County in the Southern California region used at large, meaning that if you were going to run, you ran for the entire city. You had to get everybody to vote for you. School board, same thing. Everybody in the school district was voting for choose three, choose two. Usually a school board or a city council is five, sometimes seven, but an odd number so that you don't have ties. And so a number of things have changed that. Large cities have done districts long ago, but the California Voting Rights Act changed that. Kevin Shankman, a lawyer you'll learn about later, sued some cities. Some cities and school districts have resisted, but lots in Orange County have switched over to district-based elections, and that changes the outcome. So the first thing we have to find out is, what are the rules of your elected office that you are choosing to research? So City of Fullerton switched. They were faced with a lawsuit. They just, chose to do the districts. This was the first map. Lots and lots of community input. This map was chosen partially and strangely, the five districts all converge in kind of the downtown region. The developers and kind of land barons in Fullerton have a lot of power, and so they were influential. And as we kind of learn what the job is for city council, we're looking at the budget, we're looking at the decisions they make. There are a lot of developers, there are a lot of real estate folks involved in planning commissions, kind of behind the scenes, donating money, being involved, because the land use decisions that are made by the city council members are incredibly powerful. When we look at kind of the budget of what they spend money on, you can see public safety is the biggest, um, uh, you know, line item of what a city is paying for. And so you'll see firefighters unions, police unions really involved in these elections and endorsements. But also you'll see lots of developers, lots of real estate folks. So they had a lot of power in this map and continue to have a lot of power in the city of Fullerton. So this was the map. Now we change maps every 10 years. So this was the original map. It has since been changed. And you can see that in the next map, we have kind of cleaner lines. We no longer have that weird convergence of the districts all having a piece of downtown. You see a district that is representing the east side of the city where Cal State Fullerton is. There's far more apartment buildings there, far more condos, very large. And you can kind of see by the streets, horse trails are up here, bigger areas. And so there is a socioeconomic divide here that ends up being really important for the district-based elections. Um, so those kinds of things, and I'll put them all on the same screen so you can sort of compare to see that they're kind of more compact. District 3 had this weird little jaunt over here, and so that was a big distance. Now it's more compact. So when you're thinking about campaigning, those maps become really important to who your constituents, who the people you will represent are, but also how you manage campaigning. If you're walking, if you're mailing campaign material, what are those costs associated with it? What's your target of how many votes you need to get? All of that is associated with this question of, is it a district-based election or is at large? Obviously, for at large, if you're trying to target everybody in Fullerton, that is a monumental task compared to just a fifth. of Fullerton. And so that's one of the reasons behind the districts. One of the benefits that we didn't necessarily plan for was how the staff would change their approach based on these district-based representatives being elected. And so Ahmad Zara was elected as the very first representative of District 5. It's more apartments, lower socioeconomic, fewer parks, fewer resources that maybe you might see in District 2 or District 1. And the staff started to give their reports in a different way as a result of Councilman Zara, asking for, when the Parks and Recreation was doing a report, how many parks are in my area? What is the usage of District 5 to Parks and Recreation programs? Where are they located? What is the access? When they were talking about transportation and roads, it was clearly still the roads in Fullerton are bad, but also, what is the plan for which roads get fixed? And is it going to be the people who complain from the wealthier areas of the city, or are we really looking at equity in everybody in the city having a fair shot, even if they don't know how to access the powers, the levers of power, and where to complain and where to put in requests. And so that has been interesting to watch, kind of an unintended consequence that the staff is now preparing for those questions. And so some of the data is being looked at very differently as a result of these district-based representatives. So when we look at one of the things you're going to do is go and look at the past elections. And so if you live in District 1, you want to look at the last time it was elected. So we go back to 2020, we look at 2022, that's going to cover, there are 3 seats that are on the 2020-2024 cycle, 2 seats that are on the 2022-2026 cycle every 4 years. You can do the math. But so we're going to look and see, and clearly there are no runoffs for school board or city council. They're going to be on the general election in November, which means, it's easier to get people's attention when there's a presidential election and people know that there's an election coming, higher voter turnout than in a non-presidential election when it's the governor's race in November. So there are lots of factors involved in those kinds of considerations. But just looking at the vote total. So you can see that going back, going back to the maps. Going back to the maps, you can see that when we divide these, the sizes are a little bit different. Like District 3 seems smaller geographically, but they are equal in population size, and that's based on census data. It's not the number of voters. And so we'll see that voter turnout in District 3 is lower than in District 2. And so if you're running for District 3, you don't have as high a vote target as if you lived and were running in District 2. So those are also things we're going to start to look at when we start researching. So 2020, there were 3 districts, 1, 2, and 4. And so you can see that, about 12,500 people turned out to vote in the presidential election of 2022 for district number 1, far more in District 2. So we're going to start to see these patterns. And so you look and see, when we're looking at district-based elections, there's only one winner. There's one person that represents each of those 5 districts. When we look at large districts, you're going to see, maybe you vote for 3 or maybe you vote for 2, and that changes your strategy of campaigning. So this is 2022, lower voter turnout overall, but also these districts have lower voter turnout because even if they're equal, population, it doesn't mean everybody's a registered voter. It doesn't mean likely voter. It doesn't mean all of those things. So we're just looking, and this doesn't mean that it's an exact model. It doesn't mean that you can necessarily in 2026 win District 3 with 2,200 votes, because there might only be 2 people running. There might be 5 people running. Voter turnout might be incredibly high as we're electing a brand new governor to the state of California. So these are just targets. These are just research And then you start to see what you're looking at. Overall population of the city of Fullerton is 100 and almost 40,000. So you start to see a fifth of that is divided, and then down to who actually votes. Obviously, children are considered in the census and they're not going to be eligible to vote. City of Huntington Beach is an at-large. They have not switched to districts. They have resisted the calls for the switch. And so it's a huge undertaking, and there's just lots of people hoping to be the top three vote getters. But you're talking about getting 40,000 votes. Tito Ortiz obviously was relatively famous as a athlete. So he got the most vote total based on name recognition. He then had a very controversial tenure and ended up resigning. So he's not actually on the city council. But you start to see the big differences where in Fullerton you could win one district with 2,000 some votes. Here you're talking about getting 40,000 votes. So it's much more expensive to run in Huntington Beach. You're talking about trying to address the entire city, and there aren't districts, which also means that in 2022 you can see kind of the similar. There's four because we were filling that one spot that had been appointed to replace Tito, but then the next election you're going to put that on. So that seat is a short term, and it'll be on the ballot in 2024. So Huntington Beach slightly larger than Fullerton with 196, almost 200,000 people, and so big numbers. But it also means that you as a voter get to vote for everybody who represents you, and that can be a good thing. That you get four votes in 2022, and you're voting for four different people. That introduces the campaign strategy of slates that when a voter is looking at all of these names, it can be helpful to vote for slates of people who run together as a team to say, vote for all of us. That can simplify the messaging that we're all going to vote together for the things that you care about. These are nonpartisan races. You see, there's no Democrat or Republican on any of these ballots. And you're running just with your name and your ballot designation. We'll talk about ballot designations in the future. But right now, just to give you an idea, and I'll put these two up because the other quirk of an at-large situation is that you can run every 2 years. If you don't win in 2020, you can put your name on the ballot in 2022. And so you see Gracie Vandermark and Casey McCann, who didn't win, there were only 3 elected in 2020, then are successful and are currently on the city council in Huntington Beach. And that changes things too, that you're not waiting for your particular neighborhood to be electing. The voters get to vote every 2 years. That's another, as a voter, I'm not super thrilled with the district elections because I only get to vote for one city council member or one school board member. And the reality is that I am affected, the policies are affected by everybody on the board. And it's frustrating when there's somebody you don't like and you don't get to vote against them because they aren't representing your district. And maybe the people in that district aren't paying attention to what's happening in the school board or the city council. So those are other factors that differ at large and district-based elections. But for our research purposes, you're going to go and you're going to look to see the office that you're interested in, that you've chosen for this class. What are those differences? So Brea School District is districted. The city council is not. It's kind of quirky. It's a relative, we're talking about 40,000 people in the city of Brea, so it's relatively small. There aren't some of the problems that a bigger city like Anaheim would have, and one of the reasons. So when you look at this, and this map shows you who's on the ballot 2024 and 2026 here for these particular districts and where those trustees live, which is another interesting thing, when districts are redrawn and you can I'll also sort of see like this is a huge district because these are the hills of Brea and nobody lives in this is Carbon Canyon Park and these are hills owned by a company. And so it's only these streets. Um, these are the schools. This is Brea Canyon High School. This is Brea Olinda High School. These are the elementary schools. This is junior high. You can see on this map that you can see the school sites. So that's also interesting if your city or your school district publishes this information to see where the current trustees live. That can be an interesting part as well, because if you're looking at running against someone in a district-based election, it might be really difficult. It might be somebody who served for 20 years. If there are no term limits, it can be really hard to beat an incumbent, somebody who already has the job. So that's another thing. We'll talk about term limits that you want to be aware of what is the competition? Is it an open seat where nobody has ever been elected before? So when we look at Brea's last two elections, 2020, there was one uncontested seats. Dina Miller and Paul Ruiz had nobody run against them. That's another consequence of district-based elections. Sometimes there's nobody in that particular area, and a school district as small as Brea. Sometimes there's just nobody else interested in running. So that is a factor as well. Those candidates then don't stand on the ballot. They just get elected, appointed basically by the school district. And then in 2022, the remaining two, and that was interesting because both Carrie Flanders and Nicole Cullen happened to live in the same neighborhood. There was no way to divide that big yellow part of the map into two. It didn't make sense. And so you had an incumbent versus an incumbent because it was the first time they were changing the maps for the school district. And they put two incumbents, and so one lost. It was a hotly contested race. Chris Becerra was the first, a fairly new district, and so he won that race in 2022 and currently is on the board. So back to 2020, where you see clearly there is a tie. Very low voter turnout when we're talking about the numbers for any of these districts. You know, 3,000 is kind of the top that we're getting. We're only talking about 2,300 in that District 4 for 2020, less than 2,000 in District 1 in 2022 against two incumbent candidates with high name recognition. So that starts to change the dynamics of how you're preparing your campaign. Even though clearly there are far more voters, voter turnout was relatively low in 2022. You start to see that we're not talking about trying to get 30,000 votes for these offices. So that research is going to be important for you to know what we're talking about for targets, what the past has happened. And so this was hotly contested, and you sort of start to, put yourself in the shoes of if you were the neighbor of, or a friend of, or a family member of one of these candidates and you forgot to vote or didn't vote, and then it ended up a tie. This was obviously a tie after weeks and weeks of counting, making sure. One day the vote total would be two votes in favor of one candidate, and then it would switch the next time when five provisional votes had been verified and processed, and then it would switch to the other person in favor of one vote. And it finally, after all the votes were counted, ended up in a dead lock tie. And so we were all sort of going to the bylaws of the school district of Brea to find out what happens in a tie, because you don't want to spend, it's incredibly expensive to have another election. And so there are provisions. And so for Brea, they rolled the dice. Often it's just a vote, a game of chance. It might be drawing a card, it might be rolling the dice, it might be some of that. But Gail Lyons, who was the incumbent, ended up rolling a three on the two dice to win that seat because Lauren Barnes had rolled a one and a one for a total of two. A heartbreaking end, obviously, to a long campaign with lots of money and energy and volunteer power spent on both sides to try to win that seat, and then to have it come down to a game of chances, I think, unsatisfying for all involved. But obviously, a happier outcome for the person who wins. So when I say every vote matters, I mean every vote matters, and nowhere more so than in these local elections where it can come down to a single vote. So your job, your assignment is to research your office. So again, if you're really interested in running, if you're on the ballot or putting in nomination papers in this summer and definitely know your name is going to be on the ballot, then this is an easy choice. If not, if you don't know, you can kind of look and see which office is more interesting. If you absolutely know you never want to run for office, you can just choose one in your neighborhood. And again, we can pair you with an active campaign, and you can kind of shadow that office that will be on the ballot in November and come up with a campaign plan and a budget and all of that. And then you can compare it to see what actually happens in November, and if you could have done it better, which is always a fun question to pose. So if you're in Orange County, this is easy. OCVote.gov, the registrar of voters for the county of Orange, is incredible and has so much research that I'm going to walk you through. Hopefully, if you're in a different county, your registrar of voters has that information. You may need to contact them. They don't all have it completely transparent. There's some in Northern California that are very opaque of kind of hiding that information, and you have to actually call them. But hopefully your registrar of voters is good. So you go to OC Vote and then here for the results. You click on that, and it's going to give you this page, an election results archive. Just in case they do a refresh and it looks a little bit different, just look for election results archive. Every once in a while, after I've done screenshots, they move things around, but OC Vote is pretty good about doing that really transparently. So then you're going to get this page where you do previous election results, and you're going to be able to select the year. So you may need to look and see what, if it's district, you're going to have to look at what neighborhood you're in and where that is on the map and when they were last elected. And then you're going to select that year. You're going to look for the general election. It's the municipal election, school board and city council are going to be on the November ballot. So you're going to look at the last time this election happened. Obviously, if it's at large and the entire city votes, you want to look at 2020 and 2022 to kind of see those comparisons. This is a presidential year, so there's some things that are going to be very similar to 2020, but you're also going to look at who got elected last to see what campaigns have changed. So that will help you with that. So this is part one of the assignment. What office did you choose? So write down that answer. If it's an at-large election, how many seats were elected in 2022? What were their winning vote totals? I would also want to look at 2020 and kind of compare. But for the assignment, you're just doing one. For the district elections, if districts are used, when was your neighborhood last on the ballot? And then look up that election archive data and what was the winning vote total. And also, look at, were there two people? Were they splitting the vote? That's going to be really important for your own research. You don't have to turn that in. I don't need that level of data. But for you, it's really going to be important. You want to kind of start to compile all of that information, particularly if you're running off in the future. So that gives you an idea of the at-large and district-based and gets you started on researching your office. Okay.